with thanks to my Patreons, Karol Smaczynski and Uncle Chop Chop. Thank you for supporting the channel. You are a new bassist and you want to play thrash bass. Say your band members have suddenly decided they no longer want to play hair metal, they want to play thrash. Or you're in a cover band, but you've actually never listened to thrash. What bass gear should you be using to get those thrashing metallic sounds? If you want to sound like Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth or Slayer, then this is the video for you. If you ask me what gear I think should be included in a thrash bass starter kit, then this is what I would include. We will be looking at the bass guitars, the amplifiers, the strings, the effects pedals, and of course, the bands you should be listening to. Starting at the beginning, we need to look at the definition of thrash and what we mean. Thrash is a subgenre of metal that is played at faster tempos and with a much more prominent mid-range. We can get much more granular of course, but this will do for now. In this video, I will be focusing primarily on the original wave of thrash bands from the 1980s up until 1990. Remember, this is a thrash-based starter kit. I will be making assumptions and generalizations across all aspects of the genre, so don't get offended. Some of you are not going to like this, but if there is a pro thrash bass kit you'd like to see in the future, let me know who or what you would include in that. The bands. Thrash as a genre has always had its own flagship bands, namely the big four in the US. Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax and Slayer. All have huge success and album sales to their names. Remember, the peak of thrash was 40 years ago, during the 1980s. At that time, the big four and like-minded bands all started from the same spot. They shared a similar musical style, thrash specifically, cultural impact, audiences and collaboration across the US. Since then, the big four have matured and experimented with their genres in all sorts of directions. Some now lean into commercial viability and others retain the thrashy edge. The big four are Required Listening, as well as Testament, Exodus, Armored Saint and Death Angel, to name a few. Compared to my previous starter kit video, thrash is nowhere near as cookie cutter. There was a ton of variation in the scene, drawing from an endless supply of influence. The metal genre guitarists, and thrash by extension, typically perform in the mid to higher frequency range, unfortunately occupying the bassists more punchier frequencies as a result, and in some cases purposely removing lower bass frequencies from their music altogether. See Metallica's Justice for All. Because of this, the bass guitar in thrash really boils down into one of two camps. On the one hand, you have bands like Slayer, Exodus and Death Angel, which have a bassist who is generally buried in the mix and difficult to hear, sometimes deliberately. Functionally, they occupy the lower frequencies without much relevance. On the other hand, you have bands like Metallica, Megadeth and Anthrax where you can hear some semblance of bass in the mix. Typically, the sound is plucky or clicky, deliberately avoiding the main guitar frequencies by occupying the very low end or higher frequencies. Frank Bello and David Ellefson are shining examples of this sound. This is what we mean by a scooped sound or scooped mids, something I will reference a lot in this video. Which avenue you should go down will be up to you, your bandmates and your influences. Let's look at some basses. For the starter pack, I recommend a Jackson concert bass, or a bass fitted with precision jazz, or more accurately, split coil, single coil configuration. In this genre specifically, this combo provides a punchy bite from the jazz pickup and the option of dialing in a fatness from the precision to taste, giving you the freedom to pluck away and cut through a mix like on Peace Sells, or take a step back and hold the low end like Tom Araya. Basses for the most part were a statement of style and character. They had to be mean, angry, loud and upset the normies playing their Fender Precisions. There was no one bass that was ubiquitous in the genre. Everyone had something a little bit different. Jackson had those pointy headstocks, and guitar company BC Rich had completely new shapes and contemporary designs. Both take top spots for their looks, no doubt. For starter's sake, you want an active bass with PJ pickups made by EMG. EMG pickups are mandatory. Everybody had them, no exceptions. Active EMG pickups are bright and offer more control over your tone when compared to passive pickups. If you are going down the metal and thrash bass route, changing your pickups is often the cheapest and easiest way in upgrading your bass. For this purpose alone, I highly recommend EMGs. Alternatively, you have other basses which use soap bar pickups. There can be a lot of variation with soap bars, thus making it complicated quickly. Any pair of active soap bars are permitted. In terms of tone, they may be darker, generally speaking, when compared to PJ sets and offer a different flavour. As for basses, look at the Charvel 2B, Jackson Concert, BC Rich Eagle, Mockingbird, Yamaha BBs, Ibanez Roadsters, Hammers, and ESP models. Avoid passive basses, single, split coils, and 5 strings. While the extra string is popular today, it wasn't a factor in the 80s and not authentic to the thrash sound of this era. Basses with humbuckers should also be avoided. Your Rickenbackers, Thunderbirds, Stingrays. These basses are more advantageous for slower music where the bass can breathe. Yes, I'm well aware Cliff Burton had a Rickenbacker, but let's face it, you and I am not Cliff Burton, and his Rickenbacker was heavily modified. Amplifier choice goes hand in hand with the Jackson concert bass. For the starter pack, I would recommend a solid state Hartkey with matching Hartkey cabinets. During the 1980s, solid state amplifiers were becoming more common. As brilliant as tube amplifiers are, they still had their liabilities. They were expensive, tubes were prone to burning out and in need of constant replacing. The sound itself can be quite variable depending on the tubes used and how loud you had to drive the amplifier. Both technologies are mechanically different and produce their own colouring of the bass. At the time, solid state by comparison was trendy, more affordable and thinner sounding, with an articulate clean voicing which happens to be advantageous to metal and thrash, providing the scoop sound. The original Hartkey cabinets also boasted a different speaker cone construction, being made of aluminium. Very, generally speaking, this also helps create brighter, cleaner, snappy tones like the solid state amp, helping thrash players literally cut through the mix, something David Ellefson has used to great effect. Other amplifiers worth looking at include the Gallien-Kruger RB series or Randall amplifiers. Generally speaking, if you want an authentic thrash-based sound, stick with solid state and avoid tube amplifiers. In some cases, tube heads like Ampeg can be used if you prefer a warmer, smoother, traditional sound. Moving on to strings, for the starter kit, I would suggest getting a stainless steel set like Dean Markley Blue Steel's 45 to 105. There's a running thread in this video, warm and traditional or cold and contemporary. Strings too can also be pulled into this debate. Your run-of-the-mill nickel strings are warmer and traditional sounding, easier to play and a perfect all-round genre string. Steel strings by comparison give us the scoop sound and are brighter. In terms of string gauges, anything goes really. Lighter strings are physically easier to play and more snappy, while heavier strings can give you more output at the cost of a bloated fundamental note the heavier you go. If you like moving about the bass quickly, stick to sets of 105 and under. If you're happy holding down the low end, I wouldn't go much higher than 110. The whole strings debate can be a video in and of itself. Everyone will have their own opinion. That's why it's my belief you need to go out and play as many different strings as possible, find something you love and enjoy. Strings are the easiest component of your sound to change, and I highly encourage you to do so. However, if you want the authentic thrash bass authenticity, any steel string will do. Popular brands to look at are Dean Markley, Ernie-Ball, Diodario and Rotosound. It's difficult to say which brands of strings you should avoid, but I will say, avoid any and all signature artist series. And stay away from flat wounds, just trust me on this one. Last word on strings is tuning. Tuning is an artistic choice, however at its peak, thrash was tuned to E standard in most cases. As time went on, the tuning got lower and lower, but we seem to have come full circle again, as Metallica have returned to E standard during their last record. If you really want to push the envelope, you can try playing in drop D. Effects pedals can be a blessing and a curse. It's vitally important to remember thrash as a whole is all about distorted guitars. Nobody listens to thrash for the bass alone, and bass is typically secondary to the mix. Just how it is. Unfortunately, you will be battling your guitarist for every frequency of your tone. They will almost certainly be using distortion, stealing away your mids. Should you too engage a distortion pedal, you will find your bass frequencies will simply fall out of the mix. Like I mentioned earlier, you will want to embrace the scooped sound. Cut out the competing mid-range frequencies and give a slight boost to the lows and highs. Keeping things simple for our starter pack, consider an overdrive in favour of distortion. In my opinion, you want to keep the fundamental bass note and have just a hint of drive in the overtones, retaining articulation and clarity while sounding angry. This could be as simple as a little drive from your amplifier, soft clippers like a Boss ODB3, Ibanez Tube Screamer, or your pick of Electro Harmonix overdrives. A Tech 21 bass driver could lightly be used just to get a darker, gritty vibe. With that said, distortion can be an option. If you and the band all agree beforehand that you're going for a high gain scratchy sound and happy to forgo the low end, then more power to you. Try using different distortions to what your bandmates are currently using. If they all use a DS1, try an MXR distortion instead, just to get some variation in there. Fuzz also has a firm footing in effects. It also has the added benefit of retaining your low end, keeping you in the mix whilst giving you a foreboding thick low end. Beware, you will lose articulation while the effect is in use. Have a look at a Big Muff from Electro Harmonics or a Rat, Turbo Rat for a wilder effect. Whilst not an obvious choice for an effects pedal, I would highly recommend a compressor to help tighten up your tone. While Thrash generally doesn't have a lot of dynamic range, a compressor will lift up your playing and make it a little bit more sharp and snappy. Any compressor will do without complicating matters. Boss CS3, Behringer CS400, or your overseas variants, Coco, Joyo, or Dono compressor. Finally, other effects which could be used include a chorus or phaser, usually played on songs where the bass has a few bars to breathe. One more item to mention is plectrum choice. While not a massive deal overall, it can help tie your sound together. Thrash more often than not is played by plectrum. Of course, we have virtuosos who played their fingers, so either is an acceptable choice if you can handle it. Generally speaking, the lighter the plectrum size, the more snappy your tone will be and quicker you can palm mute. Heavier picks require more stamina to play, but will make your sound chunky and output louder. Experiment to find a balance between what is most comfortable for you and sounds best. A good starting size will be a yellow Tortex 0.73mm and above. In summary, putting those constituent parts together, if you had a thrash bass gig tonight, here's what your starter kit would look like. You will be playing a Jackson concept bass and perhaps BC Rich Mockingbird as a backup, both strung up with the Markley Blue Steels 45 to 105 and strumming using a .88 green Tortex plectrum. This will be amplified by a solid state Hartkey amplifier with matching 8x10 aluminum cone cabinet, running into a compressor, bass driver DI, and perhaps a Boss CEB3 bass chorus, which is turned on when you really want to calm things down. It's as easy as that. Because Thrash has its two cams, it's really up to you how you want to express yourself. If you want to step forward and solo like Cliff Burton, you can do that. If you want to palm mute and chugga chugga like your guitarists, you can do that too. Just remember, this genre, in my opinion, is all about the distorted guitars. If you can work around their tonal footprint, you have the freedom to do whatever you want and experiment. A full list to this starter kit and all alternatives will be linked in the description. If there's a bass starter kit you want to see on this channel, let me know in the comments down below. And if there's a pro thrash bass kit, let me know who or what you would include in that. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.